You have a presentation for us.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Chime in and say that I watched the meeting last week.
No. While you're getting set up, I should note that the agenda did mention consideration of minutes from May 16th. Those minutes will be discussed and voted on at a future meeting.
That's correct, Chair. They were submitted. I just didn't have the opportunity.
I know all these people are here to watch us approve minutes, so.
Okay. So yeah, this is the presentation for the zoning text amendment, variously related to the tobacco shops and smoking related uses, principal or accessory, and related regulations. So the request from from staff to the Plan and Design Commission is for feedback. Staff recommend the commission open the public hearing, take testimony, consider the request and deliberate, and provide feedback on the FOF, that stands for findings of fact, which we're including in the packet that would recommend approval of the proposed text amendment in the packet, in the report. Staff would also ask the commission to consider this matter should be continued one more time to the June 20th Plan and Design Commission meeting in order for additional notice for the 15 license holders who have, they have licenses, but theirs is accessory sale of tobacco products, not as opposed to principal. The city has already provided notice to the principal tobacco shop owners. Okay, so real quick, this is the summary, and then I'll just hit each of these points here in another slide. So this goes back to the May 2nd Plan and Design Commission recommendation. The proposal is to provide a new principal land use called tobacco and smoking shop that essentially subsumes or takes over for what's currently in the zoning code, which is called tobacco shops. And then with that new land use, provide a definition that includes paraphernalia related to the legal use of tobacco and recreational drugs, and then allows tobacco and smoking shops as a permitted, which is a P in our section 150.490 zoning code land use tables, as a permitted use in the I light industry and B3 highway commercial zoning districts. Then the Plan and Design Commission to determine what appropriate buffers from sensitive uses, if any, and of course I'll discuss that again.
Mr. Chairman, staff recognize Commissioner Hecht has joined the public hearing.
Yep,
Thank you. This is the only slide I had gone over. So yeah, so then the second subpoint there, the new principal land use tobacco and smoking shop would adopt the existing parking requirements for tobacco shops. And then in addition to that, part of the proposal has to do with the accessory use. So in summary, allow sale of smoking products and paraphernalia as an accessory use to principal uses, provided that no more than 10% of the retail sales floor area of the establishment is dedicated to the display and sale of these products. And again, I'll talk about that just a little bit more in detail. Clarify that vape and e-cigarette shops are not permitted as principal uses, but can be accessory for number 2 above. And then just to be clear, would strike that term or phrase tobacco shops as appropriate throughout the city code and zoning code. Public comments and notice, written public comments were included in the packet. I do want to point out there were new comments submitted this afternoon from Mike Laxner. I did provide those to the Plan and Design Commission. So these comments were not included in the packet because I received them just this late afternoon. They are from Mike Laxner. I do have copies that I'll just distribute for the public's information since they were distributed to the commission. They will, however, be posted in whatever next packet occurs for this meeting. So I will just, if the public wants to review them. There's only a few. Again, though, these comments will be included in the next packet. Actually, maybe I will wait a moment to make sure everybody has a chance to review them.
You done?
It's up to you, Chair.
Yes. Would you like me to wait a moment, or should I continue?
No, you can continue.
Okay. So I just want to point that out, and then Again, the city, the city also used an e-news email blast last April 26th for the May 2nd meeting. Then again, we have collected an interested persons list, which includes people that put their name on that or anyone who put their name on that at the last meeting on May 2nd. It also includes anyone who submitted anything in writing. And then also we have the email addresses for the tobacco store operators who are the principal uses. And that list there that I just stated was provided email notice on last Friday, June 2nd for today's meeting. And then as I already stated, staff would consider the commission continue this. Staff would recommend the commission continue this to one more meeting to the June 20th. So that way we can also include the other tobacco license holders. Okay, so proposed amendment definition. So this was included in the report. So one part of the proposed amendment would be to amend section 150.202 of the zoning code. That's the definition section, to include a new definition for a new land use, tobacco and smoking shop. Note that vape or e-cigarette shops are not permitted as a principal use per another definition in section 150.202, which that there was a footnote in the report for that. However, the retail sale of those products are allowed as accessory uses. And so that is the proposed definition. Proposed amendment, this is related to the land use allowance. So currently in the city's zoning code, tobacco shops are allowed as a permitted use in every commercial district and in the I-Light industrial district. According to the commission's feedback from last May 2nd, the proposed text amendment, again, would be essentially to strike or replace tobacco shops with this new defined use, tobacco and smoking shops, and then make that a permitted use in just the B3 highway commercial zoning district and the I light industry district. The Plan and Design Commission should consider what PDC, Plan and Design Commission, should consider what buffers, if any, are appropriate. Staff had suggested for the commission to consider, if appropriate, this part which is in quotation marks. It was taken from the adult use cannabis section of code. And it just states there, no part of the property line of the proposed, in this case, well, actually it would be tobacco or smoke shop, is located within 1,000 feet of any existing public or private preschool, elementary school, secondary school, daycare center, daycare home, group daycare home, and part day child care facility. If need be, what's my next slide? This one. If need be, if the commission wants me to put up all of the buffer requirements for adult use cannabis dispensary, I have that in my presentation, but it's a few slides later because obviously that's copied and pasted and it's lengthy and it's just a bunch of text on a slide. But I can do that if needed.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman. So as you may recall, at previous meetings, the commission asked about different types of regulations with regard to the buffers. And not only is this is a subset of the regulation on buffers from the Chapter 150, 421 related to the dispensaries that staff kind of boiled down to say if you were going to consider that, you might consider the language that Carl just showed you. We do point out, however, that tobacco licensing also has a buffer, and that's Chapter 125, as Carl's pointing out here. I just wanted to make
Right.
sure in
I was
your
gonna
mind's
say,
eye,
there-
both things are in
There
in your
are
mind's eye.
there are other regulated products, let's put it that way, sales of products that there are buffers and they differ from the
Correct.
from the cannabis buffer.
And
right?
again, staff's, providing this as information, whether or not a buffer is needed is up to the commission.
Yes.
Those are the two parts of code that talk about buffers that might be related to this particular use.
Okay.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you. So part of this amendment will also amend section 150.851 of the zoning code that's related to the table of parking and loading requirements. This is actually very straightforward, and this would just strike tobacco shops, and again, just replacing with the new proposed use, and in this case, just the same parking requirements, no change there. Related to the accessory use regulations, so allow but further limit accessory sales of smoking and smoking-related products and paraphernalia to, and this is the text that comes from the May 2nd meeting, but the 20% was altered at the commission's request to 10%, so no more than 10% of the retail sales floor area open to the public can be used for the accessory display and sale of tobacco, paraphernalia related to the consumption of tobacco and legal recreational drugs or other smoking products that are not tobacco products. And then, so just to be clear, so, you have the principal uses, and in this case, the principal use, meaning, the businesses, that their primary and principal operation, that's this tobacco and smoking shop definition, and that's what the business does, and that's proposed under the recommendation by the commission last May 2nd to be in the B3 and the I zoning district. Now, to be clear on this accessory use consideration, so this is for, grocery stores, pharmacies, convenience stores, golf clubs, things like that, where that's not their primary use, but they may have an accessory sales of these types of items. And so this just tries to define and limit what that would be. And again, this was discussed at May 2nd, so this is not new, but this just refines it to the 10%. Okay, so I briefly had this slide up. So the Plan and Design Commission, PDC, had just talked about wanting additional city code information. And so those are the first 3 bullet points here. The takeaway from this, and this was just discussed, is that there's a license requirement for tobacco and e-cigarette sales, and that same section of city code currently has a 100-feet buffer required to those specific uses there that I quoted from that section. And that was in the report as well, which actually aligns with the same buffer for licensor for alcohol, certain alcohol uses and sales. Then on the bottom, I just will point out that the Plan and Design Commission did express a subsidiary recommendation to council beyond the scope of its zoning change authorization. Purview authorization. And that just broadly got to, other products. And I listed some up there: vaping, e-cigarette, THC, CBD, cannabinoid products, kratom, Delta, and other similar products. Not necessarily limited to that list, obviously.
Okay.
That is my presentation.
Okay. Questions for staff?
Just one,
Yeah. Yes,
this may
Commissioner.
have been answered in the first, 10 minutes before I got here. I don't
Miss a
remember.
little, miss a lot.
Yeah, no, I don't remember this being discussed last time either. This really is to apply to primary uses when you're primarily a tobacco shop, but you exclude businesses that I guess are 10% or less of their retail sales. Oh, so it's 10% of the floor.
Floor area, yeah.
Correct.
Okay, because I was concerned, convenience stores, and I don't even know where they would, I don't even know where they are in town here
I do.
anymore.
There are 15 license
I do.
holders with this type of situation.
Okay, well, because frequently convenience stores they may only have a small cigarette display or tobacco display. They make, that's a lot of their revenue. And I don't want there to be any confusion about how that's measured.
So, well, I believe that one of the reasons we're continuing this is to provide the opportunity for license holders in those kind of environments to come in and provide some testimony as to exactly how large that area is in their convenience, or,
Yeah,
I mean,
10% concerns me.
so that we can set that at a fair amount. What is it currently? Is it 20%?
Well, that
Right
would,
now, it's the accessory use.
Yeah, what's the limitation?
Accessory use is,
How do you
it's-
define an accessory use? Let's
in the
ask that.
code, there's some tests about what an accessory use is, and that leads to a determination. What I can tell you is an accessory use cannot be more than half of this, whatever it is, certainly, but where it is along those lines is a determination.
That's made by
That's
the
the end.
zoning administration.
Right, so what this does is it makes it a priori very objective and clear what that percentage will be, as opposed to somewhere between this, whatever, 0 and 49%, depending on the findings of the select standards. So this would very much be very bright line with regard to this particular type of.
So I think that if we were truly interested in limiting and creating that very objective standard, which I think is a good thing, personally, it's what is the right number, right?
Staff
So it
had
may not be
initially
10, it may
indicated
be,
20,
yeah, maybe
and,
20.
The commission had indicated 10 would be more appropriate, recognizing that 20 would probably not yield any, just without knowing that that's not going to be a problem for license holders. 10, when the commission said that, that's why in our memo we indicated if it's going to be 10, then I think we need to actively engage those license
And
holders.
I think we should anyway, but that's,
I
That's
just
where we
look
came
at
to
like
then.
Thornton's, which has their checkout area.
right,
Yep.
The entire thing is up top is cigarettes.
right.
And even below, I don't know if that
It's
probably.
floor
exceeds-
area.
It's floor area.
It's
There is
not,
no-
it's not height,
So
right?
there's no floor, I mean, yes.
Floor area
but
would
it's
be
still
the
gonna-
area of that shelf. That would be it.
Could even be 10%.
But-
Well,
just
can
don't-
I ask
Yeah,
another
sure,
question? It would not be, like, to that example, it would not be everything in between either, would it? It would just be the.
Floor area
the
dedicated to
circumference.
that, the floor area.
Yeah, so
On the
if they
bottom.
have space in between where the cashier would stand, that would not
That
count
is not-
towards that accessory use.
Correct.
No, so I mean, here's my concern with the number, okay? Being somebody who did convenience stores for a very long part of my career, they have changed over time, right? So I'm thinking if they used to have the little kiosk out there, that was probably, 12 by 15 or something like that, and they had a full cigarette, display, so to speak. Nobody walked into it, but they got it through the pass-through door. That would clearly fall, that the outside of this 10%, right? It would be much greater percentage because the store was much smaller, right? They probably had the same amount of cigarettes that they do in the, in the 36 by 42 store that they built after that because they started selling other things. But at one time, all the gas station wanted to do was sell cigarettes, right? If they weren't repairing cars. So we don't have any of those right now. That doesn't mean that we wouldn't have something like that in the future. So we have to just kind of think that through a little bit, I think. And I wish I knew,
What happened is we have regulation for that that's proposed.
Right.
If it becomes a principal use, well, then it's allowed in those two zoning.
right.
districts.
And
Otherwise, it's an accessory.
but their
use as
their
the-
principal use was selling gas. It wasn't
Right,
selling cigarettes, right?
right.
So I mean, I just think
But having said that.
I think we got to figure out what the right number is if we
I have
indeed want to go
concerns
that way.
With the right number and with it being measured as a percentage of retail sales floor area. Especially,
What way would you propose? That's the most clear, bright line way.
yeah, I mean, I guess you have to look at enforcement too. How do you measure if you say 10% of sales? You're then
No,
gonna
it's
have
got
to.
to be floor area, I think.
Yeah, but floor area is just, the Thornton's example where it goes up like this.
Well, that's fine.
It's this
That's
little
fine.
area.
Well, that's
It really
fine.
takes up a lot of space.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's vertical. It's not
Right.
horizontal. So I mean, we need
Seems
to
like
we
it.
can talk about that when we
Here's the
discuss
problem.
this. It's going to be
From a
interesting.
staff perspective, and to administrate this in a way that I think that if this does go through, that people are going to want to have an expectation of what the outcome is.
Right.
If you do not deal with this issue, you're going to get a lot of places that might be more than you would think should be.
Right.
Is what I'm saying.
So I mean, we have
Don't
to.
give staff this ability, bright line in the law, whatever the number is.
Right.
It will be different than what
Left
you
up,
might.
left up to interpretation.
Well, the
Right.
business community needs clarity.
That's
Right.
right. And staff
I
are
get-
clarity.
They want
for
certainty.
purpose. Yeah,
They want certainty.
yeah.
Can I ask one more
Yes, sir.
clarifying question?
Absolutely.
Okay, so in this presentation, tobacco shops are permitted uses in, whatever we're gonna determine in terms of zoning, right? A vape shop, right, or the sale of vape or these other CBD derivatives will only be allowed to be sold as accessory uses. Is that right? Regardless of,
I didn't interpret it that
No.
way.
okay.
You can't
That's
be
why I'm
a
asking.
vape or e-cigarette shop. You see the way the tobacco and smoking shop is defined? You can't be a dispensary, a cannabis dispensary, and
Mm-hmm.
you can't be a vape or e-cigarette shop. So no, you could not have a principal use that is a vape or e-cigarette.
Correct.
shop.
So
You
we're.
can't have 10% based on the accessory, yes.
Yes, so,
Correct.
so you can be a business that sells tobacco products as a principal use.
Yep.
That tobacco store can sell vape products as an accessory use. So vape products and similar things can only ever be sold as accessory uses.
Vape and
Okay.
e-cigarettes, that's correct.
And then if, in the convenience store example, we're lumping tobacco, CBD, vapes, all these things as accessory uses in that bucket.
Correct.
Yep,
Okay.
it's not additive, it's total.
Got it, okay.
Right, right. So if you choose to sell multiple products, you have 10% of your floor area that could be dedicated to cigarettes, vapes, and e-cigarettes, or you could just say just vapes.
Yep.
Right, okay.
Other questions before I ask mine? Okay. One of the things I have a concern about is the term smoking shop, right? Only from this standpoint, I think we want to be very clear that there's not on-site consumption, right? As part of this. And I don't know whether that needs to be clarified in the definition or not. But, for instance, there is a vape shop, there are vape shops around, there's one in downtown Highwood, and I don't think, people go in there and it's like a hookah lounge or whatever, and they partake at that location. I don't think that's something, based on the conversations that we've had before, that we want to,
It's a good
we want to make
question.
sure that it's,
Carl's prepared with an
Right.
answer. to that.
okay, Carl?
Yeah, I can respond to that, Chair. Per section, not in the zoning code, but in chapter 100, smoking regulations. Per section, it says, it's short, it's very short. Section 100.021, retail tobacco stores. Smoking and the use of e-cigarettes shall be prohibited in all retail tobacco stores, provided, however, that this section 100.021 shall not apply to an established smoking area incidental to the sale of tobacco
Okay.
in retail tobacco stores, if such smoking area is in existence and operational as of April 25th, 2005. So in other words, smoking shall be prohibited in
Thank you.
retail tobacco stores.
And just
Good.
one other thing to add to
Yes.
that, Mr. Chairman, so I believe there is one place that does pertain to that still was
I didn't know.
allowed.
That's interesting.
And the other thing to note is we could certainly make sure that the definition cross-references
Yeah.
chapter 100 so that other people are aware of that when reading this part of the code. It's a good point, just to make that.
Well, the state law regulates smoking indoors anyway, as well. Top of all that,
It's true.
you can't have residential in the same building. It has to be,
There's a lot
it's
of,
almost a freestanding building, and it was the only time you could do it. So I don't have complete recall on what the rules are.
but the way our laws are, we can't
Yeah,
allow
I-
anything.
I'm not
I think
sure.
just refer to the,
Yeah, I think if it's just referred to it, we don't need to restate it here. I would just refer to the other chapter of law because,
Yeah.
chapter 100 is of equal weight to chapter 1. They're all of equal weight unless some supersede others by code amendment.
all right, that's my only question. With that, let me invite the public to, yes,
Before we go to the public, one thing, we did discuss this at a previous meeting, but I want to make it clear. So legally existing uses can continue to
They're
legally
grandfathered.
exist. They're grandfathered in, it's
Yep.
called legal non-conforming. So to the extent that there's concern that a law passed today, for instance, it won't be today, it won't, has to be by the city council, but to the extent that there's a business that exists and a law is passed after that business, continues to exist, that does not affect or change the way you conduct your business, so long as your business continues in the way that it is performing and it continues in a otherwise lawful manner.
So Marcus, let me ask you a question, because one of the other things that is out of our purview, right? So from a land use standpoint, you're right. We cannot legislate somebody out of business. We can keep people from expanding or from relocating from one place to the other, or I'm not even sure whether we can keep them from selling their business as is to another party. But if the city council decided, as we had discussed, recommending that certain products be prohibited for sale, that then, in other words, as we talked about the non-cannabis, what was it called? Non-regulated cannabis style products, or whatever it was called. Thank you. If you look at that last bullet point, right? And city council decided, yes, we're going to further regulate as part of our licensing law that no, you can't sell THC, CBD, whatever those products are that they decided. Then they can't sell that, right?
Well, that takes it out of our zoning
Right.
consideration, as you.
Not a zoning issue.
Right.
The city council can determine, even after they've opened a business, that they can regulate the sale of certain products.
Right, let's say Highland Park decided to become dry.
Yep,
Right,
You could
it's
do-
the same
you
thing.
could do that, right.
Right,
Okay.
but what Marcus is pointing out, and the Corporation Council is pointing out, is this is about a zoning
Correct.
text amendment. And under zoning, you have what's called the pre-existing legal non-conforming
Yeah.
status, which is the quote grandfathering. And so, as it pertains to what's before you from council, what Marcus said pertains to
Right.
that. If council chooses as a separate legislative matter, which we point out here, it's
Right.
beyond the scope of this consideration. That,
Well,
you know,
I just
that's
didn't
a
want
separate
anybody
legislative-
here or watching to misunderstand that, the only thing we can do is talk about land use, right? So the proposal would be to restrict the sale of tobacco and related products and paraphernalia to certain zoning districts within the city. If there is a use in operation today that is outside of those restrictions, they can continue for as long as they stay in business, right? They go out of business, then
Then there's-
somebody else can't come back in
Wow.
and reestablish the business.
Technically, it depends, and
Right.
if it's abandoned or not.
Okay.
Okay, so yes, so they would be grandfathered.
They can buy the business.
But what
They
you're
can't-
pointing
they-
out is you did have a subsidiary
closed.
recommendation for
Right.
council that should council decide to take that up, and that is
Right.
not what they've charged you to do, then that would be a separate legislative matter, and they could do something like that. Like
Correct.
Marcus was saying,
Okay.
you could make something dry, or you could ban a particular product from being sold. But that's not what's before you tonight, and that's not what the live consideration is in terms of the law being changed.
And I appreciate that, because I want, that kind of tees up public comment, right? We are not here to discuss banning products. We are here to regulate the use of property, period. So as you come up, if you wish to provide public comment, I would ask you very kindly, limit yourself to that issue and that issue only. Don't, I appreciated all the information we got at the last hearing. It was very informative. I think it provoked some of our discussion, but it's outside of the purview of this group. The other thing I would request is, if you testified previously, one, when you come up, to let us know that you've been sworn, but more importantly, please don't repeat what you told us the last time. We actually do have a decent memory. So with that, if you are interested, yes, Councilwoman.
Before you open to public comment,
Sure.
I just had a question.
Sure.
if That's all right. And I'm not sure, Mr. Chair, if that's for you or frankly for staff. I know you just mentioned the lounge usage in Highwood,
I did.
and I'm wondering, I wasn't sure if you said that was banned in Highland Park as an existing thing, or.
There's
I
an
just
existing
wasn't-
law.
There's a.
Existing law
If it
bans
was,
that.
if it
for-
was, if it was
Condition-
operating before 2005, they can stay in operation that way. If they weren't, they can't establish it.
Okay, that's what my question
So
was.
that's the
Thank you.
current
I just
law.
didn't quite hear you.
I have
Thank
no
you.
Because they were
idea.
worried about this
I don't know
definition,
which one.
maybe allowing or not being clear about whether that was allowed or not. And we said, there's really no need to change this definition that's being proposed, but rather perhaps refer to the other section of code
there's one.
that already makes it clear that it's not.
I just wanted to know what the previous one was.
Okay.
Thank you very much. for the
All right,
clarification.
public comment. If you're interested in giving public comment, please step up to the lectern. And I'm going to ask you to, first of all, have you been sworn?
No,
Okay, raise your right hand. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, please state your name and spell it for our minute taker, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Leah Bacci, Lea, B as in boy, ACCI. I live at 2119 Grange Avenue in Highland Park. I am here as a resident, but also as a representative at Lake County Health Department and Community Health Center. I am the coordinator of our Community Prevention Department, youth substance use prevention, opioid overdose, teen pregnancy. I prevent it all. But I'm here just to, number one, support all the information that you received from your great coalition, CTAD, Community the Anti-Drug. I'm not going to repeat it, but I'm here to support everything from the Lake County Health Department. Regarding the accessory use, Highland Park doesn't have that now. So I think it's important to, again, establish this in an ordinance to prevent this from becoming an issue in the future. For many years, I worked at the old Ware Haynes Mobile when I was young, and I worked there at a time when there were kiosks out, and there was all the promotion, and everything was there, and it was very, very accessible. We have made that not accessible up until this point, and let's keep it that way. We are seeing access go down in our Illinois Youth Survey data, and so I would encourage anything that we can do to prevent access would be very beneficial. It will also prevent any type of kiosk in terms of talking about a product. I'm not talking about not selling it, but if vendors continue to sell products like Kratom or Delta 9, Delta 8, et cetera, this would prevent them from having a kiosk very easily accessible to young people. So I just wanted to say those things. Thank you very much for your time and the consideration of this, and I am in support of you passing some type of ordinance relative to access. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a quick question.
Sure.
This isn't
Don't go there.
CBD things.
It's a CDV. It's one of the unregulated cannabis.
Okay, because Delta 9 is regulated. Delta 8 is not.
I don't know what the Delta 9
There's a
is.
bunch
I
of-
think, I don't know. I'm just trying to make sure I
One
understand.
of those.
what everybody's talking about.
I see somebody chomping at the bit to answer that question, though. I know that
And
she's,
then I will yield.
okay. Come on up. Have you been sworn?
No.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, and your name?
My name is Muammar Bader. It's Muammar Bader. I'm a partner with the tobacco shop on 1821 St. John's, Island Tobacco and Vape. And we were here with the public hearing that took place a couple of weeks ago. Me and my partner, we're both non-smokers. We don't smoke weed. We're both parents, and we're both very responsible with these regards. So anything that concerns the public, the city, Highland Park, we will comply with, as we have always been complying with anything that was related or given to us by the city. And I remember when I talked to Mr. Burhoff to get the licenses, I remember it very clearly that he said, I want to walk into a tobacco shop, not into a vape shop. And that, based on that, the floor plan was provided to him, and we set up the whole place according to the floor plan that was provided to Ms. Burrow. And anyone is more than welcome to walk in and take a look. Our business is mainly tobacco. The principal use is tobacco, cigars, and cigarettes. Anything, any other item that we sell in there is accidental. It's not 100% principal for us. All these items that were addressed before, the CBD, the Kratom, the Delta 9, are allowed in the state of Illinois, allowed to be sold, and it depends on the cities if they want to ban it or keep it or whatnot. And I am supporting to banning these items in case they were sold to underage people or were dealt with irresponsibly. And this is the zero tolerance policy of our shop in here. I'm talking only about our shop. We have many signs in the shop that says underage sale is prohibited. If you're not 21, don't walk in. And we have cameras all over the place, not for security, because we're in Highland Park. We don't care about security. We love this community. We love the city. We have the cameras, just if anybody from the city, the police department wants to take a look, more than welcome to see that we ID every single person, including seniors. So this should limit the fear of, these items being sold to underage or kids, which we will not tolerate or accept. The other thing, our storefront, there is zero advertising material on the storefront, on the signage that markets Delta 8, Kratom, or vape. Actually, no, vape I got for the disposables, we got some posters, but nothing is related to weed, Kratom, Delta 8, Delta 9, nothing on the storefront. So kids can walk as if they drive by with their families into a gas station and see Marlboro, see a vape, it's the same. It ain't gonna harm no kids, it ain't gonna manipulate their mentality, let's say, to walk in and ask about whatever. Am I taking a long time, sir?
No, you're fine, but your
so
3
the-
minutes are up and I'm gonna let you go for a
It's
little
a
bit.
little scary to speak in front. I was
That's fine.
telling
No,
the lady
you're
in there.
fine. I'll let you know.
Yeah, but what I wanted to say, we've opened this business, me and my partner, 6 months ago, and it's our first business. It's his second business. For me, it's the first. Flight attendant for 13 years, never dealt with tobacco, but this is the only thing that I know right now, that experience that I acquired. We followed every rule that was instructed to us by the city of Highland Park, and we've implemented all these rules. The sale of these items is not, as I said, principal, but it's a good revenue for our shop, for the sustainability of our business. So again, we will comply with whatever the city decides, but yeah, please consider the continuity of our business. Thank you.
Thank you.
And it's a great pleasure to be in front. Thank you.
Next. Here comes your definition of Kratom. And you've been sworn previously.
I
correct?
was sworn previously,
All right,
Barbara
please.
Denecker from Community, the Anti-Drug Coalition.
Thank you.
Serving our local community, and I wanted to answer your question. So, the answer to the question is yes and no. So Delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinoid, which is Delta 9, comes from the marijuana plant. And when it comes from the and it's the psychoactive addictive component of the marijuana plant. And when it comes from marijuana, then it is regulated under the Illinois Cannabis Regulation and Taxation Act. However, you can also create Delta 9 synthetically, in which case it is not covered under the Illinois state law.
Interesting.
And that's what we were talking about with Delta 8, Delta 10, Delta 11, THCO, HHC. Those are all products that are either synthetically derived or come from the hemp plant as opposed to the marijuana plant. And really the only big difference there, according to the US Federal Farm Bill, is that the hemp plant has 0.3% or less THC. But what happens is some of these manufacturers then just extract that 0.3% as much as they can. And then of course they have a lot of residual leftover plant, but that's the same THC, same psychoactive component as if you got it from marijuana. And then they can use that either in vapes or in edibles and things of that nature. So as such, I also wanted to address very quickly on-site consumption. Honestly, I don't know the answer to this, but what staff had just read off was that smoking and vaping is already prohibited. I'm not sure if these tobacco and smoking shops, as they are now going to be known as, if they are also selling these edibles of Delta 8, Delta 10, HHC, in which case on-site consumption might be a concern because the marijuana law only regulates no on-site consumption if it comes from the marijuana plant and not from the hemp plant or if it's synthetically derived. So the state left a big hole is basically what I'm saying.
Appreciate that.
Yes, of course. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, the one thing I will tell you is I really think regulating regulating edibles is gonna be, would be a challenge, in my opinion, that's all. Anyone else? Okay,
More of a police matter.
pardon me?
It would be
That's a
more of a
police
police
matter, yes. Okay, so we have a couple of things that the staff would like some direction on. One is the buffer,
Do you want one? And if
You
so,
want-
how would you like to
Right.
implement it?
the other one is the area of the amount of accessory, how to define accessory use in terms of square footage or some other manner, right? Percentage of the square footage.
We're not asking that. I believe Commissioner Heck did, but
Well, I
we're
am
just
too.
verifying that the 10% under the
Yeah.
definition that we gave is what the commission wants per the commission's direction last time.
Okay, so first, I guess let's ask the threshold question, is any, because I will take note that it impacts the buffer. First of all, are we satisfied that the two zoning districts that we have recommended are what we want to put into the final recommendation? That be the B3 and the I districts. Right? I see consensus, so everybody's nodding. Yeah,
So there's no
Wait,
additional
wait.
feedback on that. And
Mr. Hecht,
I just,
you having second thoughts?
well, I understand restricting it, and I don't have a zoning map in front of me to know where everything is, and that's,
Well, basically, B3 is the corridor along 41.
right.
And the I, the only problem I have with the I,
Up to zoning.
Greenberg Radiology?
no,
Because it's next to.
it's at actually Green, well, that's one
Let's just
site.
call up a zoning map.
Right,
instead.
call up the
We
zoning
could
map.
talk about it too long.
But-
Yeah.
It's that and it's Solo Cup
Well, no, I mean, it's a lot.
are the two that I have a concern about. That I'm not saying
Oh,
those are the only
oh,
ones.
okay.
Those are the ones that are closest to residential, I believe. Right? It used to be much easier.
You just roll it down from the ceiling.
No, you used to be able to go right to the zoning map. So,
Yeah, the gray, you could see is the I zoning district, and then the B3 is that purplish color in different spots that runs all the way up to the border, right, Carl? And then all the way down to Crossroads, is that right? Yeah. Right, there's Crossroads, right, and there's the Lake Cook Road.
what's Solo Cup zoned? Is that,
I, that, right there.
that's I.
And the buffers would be around the schools?
Well, the buffer can be whatever we want it to be. It could be to a residential district, it could be to just the schools. But, you know, the other question is, a liquor store can go there. Why not, you know, if we're,
The buff, yeah.
yeah, why not I mean, to me, if we really want to regulate and I think it's the commission's recommendation, or it was the sense of the commission that the city should take a look at at banning these products as part of their licensing purview, which is not the purview of this group. You know, does that ameliorate the concerns of putting it into an area where there's near residential, where it's near residential? Or do we want to put a buffer to the residential areas as well as anything else?
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes,
you know, a couple of issues that have come up before the council very recently really have had to do with buffers to residential from light industrial. And, you know, it almost sounds like we need more of a generic and general policy for a lot of these instances.
Well-
And whether that's different products, the bottom line is it's the same general question in terms of what is a buffer?
well,
And so I'm just raising that. for
I
your
appreciate that.
consideration.
I will tell you that I know the instance you're talking about, and I have at least one of them that had to do with an auto repair facility near residential. I just
Well, but the council has directed that this was something they were gonna come back and look to in general,
They-
irrespective of one particular.
And when they send it to us, we'll look at it, but they haven't sent it to us as far as I know yet, so.
I'm just.
I appreciate that.
Consideration.
We'll keep, I mean, I think at this point, this is what's in front of us, right? This particular, request. We can deal with this request. We can't deal with potential other requests. And I would say it probably could be used as a precedent going forward if we put a buffer on there.
Exactly.
So,
That's all I'm.
and that's fair. No, no, 1 minute. That's okay.
I mean,
Yes,
We do.
my general takeaway from this meeting is reflecting on a previous one, and I think it helped reinforce for me some of the decisions that we made in May. If what we get out of this is restricting the uses to B3 and industrial, and we get to 10%, I think that's a pretty good win, in terms of previously being permitted in all land uses.
okay.
So, yeah.
So you're saying you like it as currently proposed, so B3 and I,
Yeah, I'm satisfied. I mean, I'm
limit the
amenable.
accessory use to
Yeah,
10% of the
yeah,
floor
temporary
area.
I'm pretty satisfied with it.
Okay,
It's,
Commissioner Heck?
I'm wondering, I understand restricting it and we don't want it in, I wonder like B2RW, it's a main commercial corridor, but it is next to residential, so I get that. I understand some of the other, some removing it as a permitted use from other districts. But I wonder why we're not permitting it in B5 in the central business district. And I'm wondering, and I see, and I was looking for, what's the zoning for the Starbucks and what used to be Players? That's B1.
B1, neighborhood,
And
it's a neighborhood
The
node.
neighborhood center, I'm not sure, I don't know where else B1 is offhand. but-
It's up on the north end by,
Yep.
on Old Elm and Western, and it's down in Brayside. And it's at Waukegan, like bordering Highwood, right? Like Bloom and that area,
Yeah,
B1A.
well, B1A is different, but I wonder,
a whole lot different.
and that's B1, but that's all residential now,
Yeah.
No, it isn't.
Almost.
isn't it?
There's at least one office down there.
They've got a mixed use, right?
Yeah.
There's a,
There's
I
some
just
mixed-
wonder if
commercial on the
we're, one of the concerns I have is that we get so restrictive, we end up cutting off landlords to potential tenants, and we go too far. I'm not a smoker, I don't like smoking, I don't want to be around it, but I don't, and which is why I'm open to most of this, but I am mindful of when you get too restrictive, you either, when you cause people to find loopholes, or you cause people to do things that illegally, and they try to get around things. Or we cut ourselves off and they move across the street into the next community and set up shop there, and it doesn't really change, what we want to accomplish doesn't occur. So, I think that we're going, I originally said last time we were here, I thought this was a solution in search of a problem. I still, to a point, believe that, but I think there are a couple of other districts, in B1 and B5 being the two that I'm thinking of right now, that we might want to rethink.
Well, I will tell you, I absolutely will not support it in B1. That's neighborhood commercial, this is not a neighborhood use, right? It's not in keeping with, I think, the tenor of it, but let me ask Councilwoman Lidauer, there was something that precipitated this being sent to there's something that precipitated that, yes, I'm
may I
sorry.
answer that question?
Sure, you can do it for me. You know where I was
Or do
going,
you,
is
Councilmember?
what caused the city council to want us to look at
So,
this?
Mr. Chairman, and as we said at the outset, and I know we have lots of meetings, and so it's hard to remember all these things at times. But yeah, as we had said at the outset, there were several complaints that were received regarding the recent establishment of these uses in the downtown area that specifically led to the recommendation to council from staff that this might be something that the council wanted to consider. The council then took a look at what was referred to as the red flag resolution that had been drafted, and they decided unanimously to send it to this commission to be considered. They did not say one way or the other how it should be considered. So it is still, it's entirely before the commission in terms of how to regulate and how to recommend. But nonetheless, you asked what precipitated this being sent to you. That's what did. But nothing else was said.
And the only thing I would add to that is as far as numbers and restrictions and changing down from 10 districts to 2, none of that was.
No, I really.
So I think it's wonderful that you're looking at all of those because it will significantly.
The reason I asked the question was, I knew the answer, but it was brought to us in part because there were complaints about it being in the B5 district, right?
Correct.
So that's just so we have that on the record, that's why it got to us, right?
Yeah, but I also
But there was no direction given to us
No,
other
there was
than,
not.
No, there was.
other than just
No, I
to
know.
have a hearing,
Excuse me,
right?
but there were multiple applications for a certain use at one time that happened to come in, which caught us by surprise, and frankly, I think caught the public by surprise. So had there been one application instead of 2 across the street from one another and a third down the street, I don't think this would have come. But because it came, for whatever reason, in one slew, 3, I think that's why we asked for your guidance.
There were multiple applications, as the
Right.
council member indicated. There was also sign code violations that have since been rectified,
we
but
know.
that also precipitated.
No, it was also downtown.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
Yes, Vice Chair.
Oh, so my question would be, and I think I'm tagging along to Mr. Hecht here. When we talk about the tobacco shop use in the B5, can we see a comparison to what we allow for alcohol sales in the business districts? Because I feel like it's kind of the same thing. And it only occurred to me now to,
Well, you'd asked that, I think, before.
well, I'd asked that, and I think I'd also asked about how we do the licensing. Like, is there a limit to the licenses of alcohol sales in town? Is there a limit to the tobacco sales?
Well, we
know there's a
provided the
limit.
limit tobacco. There's a 100-foot buffer, and the alcohol is a 100-foot buffer from
But-
certain uses.
Do we limit the number of licenses to people to sell it? Like, can we say that there's only 20 places in town that are allowed to sell tobacco? Or there's 20 places in town allowed to sell alcohol?
I don't know the answer to that question, but we can get that for your next meeting.
Okay,
Not to my knowledge, but I don't know the answer, though. I will
okay.
say that.
I feel like this all needs to be,
But we're not proposing a specific number limitation.
no, I'm just trying to understand how it works.
Okay.
So the liquor stores as a principal use are allowed in every commercial and industrial zoning district except for the neighborhood B1 commercial and then the Waukegan Blue B1A.
Okay,
Otherwise, liquor stores again are allowed as permitted use in every commercial industrial zoning district, and then tobacco shops
They
are
were-
currently allowed in every.
And
All the districts, all the commercial districts.
Chair.
okay.
Yes,
Just to address Vice Chair's question, here in Highland Park, there's explicitly is no limit on the number of liquor licenses for each class of license. However, there are communities that do put a cap as to how many licenses can be issued.
Well, and I was remembering when we were talking about the cannabis dispensaries, that there was going to be a limit to how many.
Based on square footage.
Based
No.
on, I think
Almost,
it was-
based on the buffering.
It was
Yeah.
based
So
on the
it's
buffering.
not,
that
an-
they
it's
were-
not an
They were
explicit
lim-
limitation,
Right,
it's a
it
de facto.
became right, it's only a limitation by the area that we have for it.
So we have buffers, and so if you equally space them throughout,
Right,
you would get
understand it.
one number,
There's a
but if you
limit.
don't, then, you have different
Right,
results.
there's a physical limit.
Right.
that's how they regulate it.
Right, but that was, I just want to remind the commission that was really about appropriate buffering, not setting a specific number limitation.
Correct,
Yeah.
there was a discussion on how many shops we would have at one point, and we determined it was self-limiting based on the buffering.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
That's correct.
But we don't have that same issue with tobacco or alcohol.
We could. We just
I
don't.
presumably we could, that would be a lot of, based on the buffering, that would be a lot of shops, but.
I would just remind, I mean, Mr. Chair, when you say we could, that's not something live before you.
Right.
No,
No,
no, no,
I know
I'm just
that.
trying to
I mean-
understand it when we, because if we're gonna talk about limiting the tobacco to just the two areas, and we allow the alcohol sales in a number of other areas, you know, do we need to discuss why one and not the other? Because I feel like, you know, if they're all the,
You don't need to discuss why one or the other. I
No.
think it's an interesting and good point from a land use perspective, if you choose to consider them equivalent land uses, but they are distinct and different in our zoning code, and they can be regulated distinctly and differently, as they are now, as Carl pointed out. I believe liquor store establishments are allowed in fewer districts than tobacco shops now.
correct, right.
So you can regulate them differently. But I understand what you're saying if the commission agrees with you that these are the same kinds of uses and you should regulate them similarly. One could make an argument that way. We are not based on the feedback from previous meetings from the commission.
Okay, no, thank you. I just thought it was worthy of looking at.
And I'm really
Mr. Chairman.
confused. Yes,
If I may. So
Mantis.
as we started to look at the buffers and, I think the staff's comment was, like 1,000-foot buffer. If we start looking at I'm not able to measure here, but if we start looking at the B3 zoning and the I zoning, if you've got 1,000-foot buffer from residential, you're gonna be pretty restrictive on all of this stuff. And I think, I tend to kind of agree with Commissioner Hecht. I feel like we've been sufficiently restrictive on many of these points, with regard to square footage and things like that. I would be open to expanding some of the, zoning areas that we're looking at beyond just the two. Doesn't need to be terribly broad, but I don't want to be too restrictive here.
Other comments? Yeah,
One more thing,
Sure.
I want to bring back.
Mr. Heck.
And, I'm a real estate lawyer, so I
You are?
deal with these kinds of things a lot. And I've been a landlord for convenience stores, which is where my information comes from about the percentage of revenue generated from tobacco.
That's a
But,
lot.
the other thing that bothers me about this is that I'll say it again, I said this before, that 10% limitation, based on floor area, I really have a problem. I could take a bowling alley shaped space, line the entire outside walls with cigarettes and not violate that 10%
Right.
and be an ancillary use. And that would be 100% of my revenue. I could do it. And there would be nothing anybody could do because the zoning would allow it based on that standard. We have to come up with something else
I agree with you.
that regulates it as a non-principal use, whatever we want to call it. I just see this, we're restricting this so much that we're going to end up, people are going to find loophole. That one I think will be ineffectual.
Well, so what other suggestions would you make?
Well, I think we can look at revenue. Even businesses file sales tax returns. And you can get that information. I think there's a way to do that.
Makes sense.
Maybe volume is a better way to look at it rather than
Square footage.
floor area. Those are just two things off the top of my head. But
That'd be-
something that's a bit more, that you can't get around so easily. If we're gonna have and I get the idea of the restriction, I agree with it, but it's measuring it in an effective way.
So you're saying volume of sales or like volume or
Physical.
shelf area?
Well, I think either
volume.
one. I think volume of say, percentage of revenue can be one measure, which is done in lots of contexts.
I see you.
But the other, it'd be a lot harder to do volume of the
Okay.
percentage of the volume of the
So,
store.
Director Fontaine, I
Maybe
think,
surface area.
I think Director Fontaine has some concerns about what,
You know,
or
I
some
understand where Commissioner
input.
Hecht is coming from, and I understand that generally speaking, floor area is, you know, it's readily accessible and understood, and generally it will work. Sure, someone might do some of those kinds of things, and I would not break from the floor area. I wouldn't get into the percentage of sales for revenue. That would be my recommendation as part of a zoning matter. I would not do that. Having said that, a volume measure could be used to get at what Commissioner Hecht is saying, as he said, volume perhaps. We could tie a volume no greater than a particular percentage as it pertains to the floor area. So let's say you have a floor area, not a volume, of 100 square feet, and you said no more than 10% of the floor area in volumetric terms could be used for sales. You could back into it that way.
That might
You
be-
could also,
See what
I
I'm saying?
think,
Yeah, I see what
you
you're
you
saying.
could also
You could do that.
say 10% of the floor area no more than X number of feet high too,
You could.
which would be another
You could.
way to do it,
Yeah,
right?
I'm, again, I'm kind of coming up off the
That-
top
that's
of my
true.
head, but
You
I
could.
can just see this being so easy to get around that, to find a way to make it not so easy.
Okay.
Surface area.
Commissioner Quinlan wanted to add something,
Oh,
or you had your hand up before I recognized the director?
Surface area. I mean, I think that's what we were talking about with the wall area, surface.
Yeah, I personally, I am a little confused by what districts the commission thinks that we should allow these in. I think part of the concern, to be honest, is, and we've seen it in the public comment about it's as much an image concern, I would say, with the downtown area, right? That for some reason, whatever reason, that folks view this as a undesirable use from an image standpoint, right? And I don't know how to deal with that. In terms of the number of shops in an area, one time we had a cupcake shop on every other storefront, and that resolved itself because you don't use zoning to limit competition, right? That you just don't. And so, the fact that you had a slew of license applications for this kind of use, doesn't, at some point, the fit will survive and the others will go away. But the question is, in my mind, is where is this an appropriate use? It, in my mind, is not an appropriate use in B1 or B1A because we don't allow liquor even there. And if we're equating it to liquor, why would we want to have a smoke shop there? I'm torn a little bit. I mean, I can understand the central business district argument because I personally wouldn't have, I wouldn't have a problem necessarily with having a dispensary in downtown Highland Park. That's just me. I mean, there's one in downtown Highwood, and it doesn't seem to have wrecked downtown Highwood for that purpose, or for that matter. But that's not what the city wanted. The city wanted it in certain areas, and that's where they deemed it appropriate. Again, these are a lot of times, what they're selling are unregulated cannabis products, right, or cannabis-based products. To me, if the city was to say, we're prohibiting that, the sale of those things, then you ask yourself, if somebody put a cigar store in downtown Highland Park, would it be a problem? And I think the majority of the people in this community would say, no, it's not a problem, right? The problem is all the other stuff that's being sold beyond the tobacco products here. So that's an issue, I think, for the city council to deal with, and I would hope that they would. And I think it will be part of our recommendation that they do. I could support, I think, allowing, assuming that they took that step, I have no problem with putting a tobacco shop in the central business district. But I think, and I appreciate what the gentleman who runs the shop on St. John said, but he had, when he opened, all these lights all these signs that were out of code that promoted exactly those products, right? As did the one up on Western and Old Elm. I know because I sent a picture. And it was, and so, I appreciate you saying you don't want to sell them, but you were promoting them. And and I appreciate you're not promoting them now, but that doesn't mean that, people aren't aware. The guy up at Old Elm, he just took his signs and put them on the wall. You can see them just like they were in the window, but it's legal, right? So, to me, these two things go hand in hand, and I don't know how to separate it, right?
Well, is there a way to do that now that you mentioned, like, people might not object to a cigar store, but they would if it sells vape products and other things. And
That's part of the licensing part of
Is
it,
it part
right?
of the licensing, or can we recommend maybe two different zoning classifications and regulate even the ancillary uses to kind of prevent, I'm not sure, to prevent.
I'm going to ask Corporation Counsel and the director to opine on that, is that, you would do that through definition, right?
Yes.
So
I
is
mean,
that
how it would
is that
look,
a-
I have no idea, but,
Okay.
yeah, just,
so for the next meeting, if you could do a little research, both of you, and come back with an answer to that, because I think that is going to perhaps guide this. Vice Chair.
Well, and I think some of our concern is due to like the advertising. Do we have regulations on advertising alcohol and advertising tobacco, regulations that I'm not aware of?
I don't know.
so.
Corporation Counsel.
Guess it was.
I'm not making a suggestion, I'm just kind of thinking out loud
Thinking
here.
aloud, yes.
And right now what we have, we're going from permitted uses, about 10 of them down to 2, but we've not really considered making them.
I mean, districts you're talking about, yeah.
I'm sorry, yes, in districts, making them conditional uses.
Well, we talked a little bit about that, Marcus, I think, and the trouble, I think, with conditional uses is it's hard to say no to those if they meet the standards, right?
Absolutely.
And so how do you define the standards that you're not selling a product that somebody finds objectionable? I think that's a hard standard to enforce, right?
And
Wouldn't it be?
I'm not saying that we would be in a position, and again, I'm still thinking out loud, where we would even say no, but it gives us the ability to put conditions upon them. Now we can talk about advertising on the wall, because there is a relationship between the relief they're seeking and the condition in that
Well,
case.
There's a sign ordinance too that we enforce, so I think I'm worried about getting into free speech territory too with some of that. Commissioner Mantis, you wanted to say something?
We kind of started to have this conversation, I think, at the first meeting, and the hard part about what we're talking about is the idea of paraphernalia, because there is a commonality between the use of paraphernalia for tobacco and the use of paraphernalia for marijuana, and that's where, we had this conversation
Right.
once, and it's very difficult to parse those two.
Thank you for saying that. That was something I was going to bring to our attention because, okay, you're talking about products, but I will tell you the complaints are about paraphernalia, okay, as well. All right. So So again, the council sent this for you to consider, where would you allow uses like this? I did put, to the city manager about, are we talking about regulating products? Perhaps we should do that through a different kind of code. She said no to me, and we talked about then we would recommend a red flag resolution regarding land use matters. And so I just will tell you that, that
Right.
conversation, at least between me and the city manager, was
And that's all we can do, really.
correct, and that's all that you've been assigned, right, that's correct. And so if council deemed otherwise, the council can, do that as it
They can do
deems
it
necessary.
their next
And
meeting.
when we sent them the red flag resolution, they sent it and referred it to you to take a look at as a land use consideration.
Right.
So
And the other parts they can do
they can-
whenever, they could take up next meeting if they want.
And, they'll be fully aware of, what transpired at these meetings when the council gets the memo with the recommendation.
And,
So,
and I'm
yeah.
sure that our liaison will give a full report of what the discussion was about, so.
Got it.
We're still looking for giving staff some direction here, guys. Because otherwise, we're gonna be back in 2 weeks and we're gonna have the same discussion over and over again. And it's gonna be like
Just remember
Groundhog
this, though,
Day.
this will be recommending a continuation, and there may be some more testimony that
Right.
may shape your ultimate recommendation, but we can go with what we have at this point. If there's any feedback that you want to give us to see be changed for next time,
I
we
think the
certainly will.
idea of somehow looking beyond, beyond square footage on the
Yep.
accessory use has some,
Heard about the
some
problem.
validity, right?
Yep.
So I think you should probably come back with a recommendation,
Okay.
specific recommendation based on your ability to enforce whatever that
Right.
regulation is, because I don't want to create problems for you all, right? So to me, it sounds like either surface area or floor, square footage of, floor area with a height restriction as to how high they could
Easiest.
put it, right? Then, I don't know, I'm still not sure how we should be dealing with the district issue either.
So my opinion is until city council comes up with a recommendation for dealing with the unregulated cannabinoid products, that maybe we stick with what's here and just permit it in the I light industry and the B3 districts.
Can I ask you a question before you answer, ask or make your
Your meeting,
observation?
Mr. Chairman, yeah.
Could we say, this is our recommendation if you allow the sale of cannabinoid products? Unregulated, non-regulated cannabis project. Thank you, I'm not as
Yes,
loquacious as you are.
that can certainly
But,
be, right.
and if you don't, if you
Then
don't
we
regulate it,
yeah.
we recommend you limit it to these districts.
All right.
If you do regulate it, then we would recommend that you add the following districts to those other districts.
That sounds good to
Right.
me.
Good, it's your recommendation, you could.
So I would think, personally, I would recommend, let's leave it as it is for now, with that caveat, and I would say, if they're going to regulate, or not only regulate, but ban those products, then at least the central business district, I think, is in play to have smoke shops in. I still don't think it belongs in B1 or B1A, and I don't know where the B2s or B2 or B4 are, right? Central
it-
business district,
That's
B5, right?
QRW. The B2 is in Roger Williams.
So that's, yeah, and I don't know that it
There's a
belongs,
couple.
I don't know that it belongs there, because that's, to me, it's more akin to a neighborhood commercial district than it is.
We could certainly craft the recommendation with what I think you need to assume is that no other regulation changes, right? We have a system of
Right.
laws, council sent you
Right.
this as land use. That's the recommendation, is your primary recommendation. You could have a subsidiary recommendation that says, should the council choose to regulate these other products
Okay.
in some fashion or form, this should be reconsidered.
I can get behind that.
Okay.
Can I
Commissioner Mantis?
can I further
Sure,
complicate things?
sure,
So-
of course. That's why we're here.
So is it an option, going back to Corporation Council's point, to make it a conditional use in B5 but a permissible use in I and B3.
I believe that the staff has some feelings about conditional uses.
I don't, staff respectfully wouldn't recommend doing that, but certainly that is a legitimate recommendation that could be made.
Gonna make our workload a lot harder.
Yeah, and
I mean, you know, I would just remind the commission of the last use that we recommended in downtown B5, that we recommended as permitted and was decided to be a conditional use, and there seemed to be some regrets on that being a conditional use afterward. And so
what was that?
that was the, yes, the animal.
Oh, the vet?
Yep, that's correct. So I just point that out. And so, listen, that is a perfectly, you know, legitimate land use consideration to have as a C. But then remember, the recommendation is also not permitting it in a whole host of other districts. So I would say it would be probably not recommended to have I, B3, and B5 and no other commercial districts. I don't know how that would work. That's from a staff
Sure.
perspective, respectfully.
I was just throwing it
Certainly
out.
could recommend conditional use, but, you know, we're going from something that's already been permitted for many years in the community, that and wide variety of, actually, all of our commercial zones, to now limiting it to 2. We respectfully recommend that those be permitted. And then, you know, the other zoning districts, if you choose to allow it there, maybe those are conditional, I don't know. But right now, the proposal is they're not allowed.
Other feedback for staff?
Can we, since we're coming back on this,
Since we're
can we have
resting.
this, like I mean, we are, right?
Yeah,
Yes,
Can we have a
it's coming back.
special, almost outreach to the affected business
they are.
owners?
Yeah,
They
we are.
I
have.
mean, are they, because I see we have one that's here.
They
No,
have.
we've already gone, we've already
have.
directly contacted all
Okay.
primary use businesses. What we've proposed and recommended a continuation for is to do outreach to the uses that are, that have accessory.
Yeah, I'm
license holders
including
that are
them.
Right.
Yes, we are.
So they
We're
did
gonna go
outreach.
directly to them. Yeah.
There are 5
Five
businesses
primary,
in Highland Park that have this as a primary use?
Yes,
correct.
Okay.
And there are
And
15
The
accessory.
15, I
licenses.
heard that you said
they
before.
and they did outreach to them. If you remember when we
thought
had it
we
the last
did, but
time,
this was one or
when we
two.
did it the last time, the gentleman who owns Old Chicago
Yeah, a
was
number of people
here.
came out,
I think the
Yeah.
person maybe from Island Smoke might have been here. So,
But we'll
yeah,
do a direct contact to those
And in fact-
15 those accessory license
in fact,
holders,
the
just so that they are fully aware.
in fact, the commission directed staff to reach out directly to those
We did,
people,
okay.
right?
I
So,
don't have the memory you do.
I'm an elephant. So, okay. Jackson, you want to say anything? Because you've been quiet tonight.
The one thing that's been going over in my head is something that we talked about at one of our very first meeting about this happening. I know Vice Chair Moore explicitly asked me about this. And I mentioned that especially like B1 and B2 and somewhat B5, we do have that pedestrian overlays, that these are very walkable districts. People live very close to these districts. Children walk through these districts every single day when they're coming home from school. I live in the Ravinia neighborhood. I go to Highland Park High School. I drive past kids walking in downtown Highland Park in the Ravinia district every day. So for me at least, I feel like B5 may be a conditional use, but B4 even with buffers, of course, with residential might be a good idea because those are also like, they're a little bit outside
Right.
of the central business district. They're not included in that pedestrian overlay. So people will be driving into the central business district, maybe not seeing a smoke shop that may set them off in some place, but there's still that business opportunity offered to them near that district. Of course, not next to a residential area.
And this is why Jackson is a valuable resource to our commission. I appreciate that.
It's definitely good to have.
All right, do you have what you need, Carl, and,
I don't think we decided on buffer yet.
oh, yeah, let's talk about a buffer.
Like to do.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair.
For hours.
Is it necessary? And then
Do we
have
want
some
to
options.
buffer, do we want to buffer from each other? Do we want to buffer from, I mean, obviously, I think you have the same type of buffer that you have for a liquor store, which is what, 100 feet from a school or,
Could you go to those, Carl? The liquor store and the tobacco. The current law is this, and it's not a zoning law. This is
right?
about
This
license.
is in the licensing law.
So, you know,
So,
deviations past this would be past what already is the law.
so as it refers, as it pertains to this, do we need to, I mean, do we want, I'm asking this of the commission, do we want to put a buffer in the zoning text, or do we want to add this to the recommendations, the subsidiary recommendations to the council, that they determine what the right buffer is?
I would respectfully, Mr. Chairman, if
Yeah.
I may, I would say that these are outside of the zoning text amendment
Right.
that you're considering. I would consider it from a zoning perspective only, and staff will be sure to alert the council of these other regulations.
Yeah.
There's an important difference here. With zoning, you have certain grandfathering that goes on, and we're talking about prospective uses. With licensings are renewed every year. Unless otherwise specified as some type of grandfathering and licensing, that could be made, you change those numbers, it could affect the current license holders for the next year. That's not before you. So
Right.
that's a separate legislative matter, as I mentioned.
I'm just trying to
before.
figure out what the right place
Right.
is to do this,
So
if we want to do it.
You're talking about future land uses, that being the one that's defined, and whether or not they should be buffered from any particular use or multiple other uses. I heard some talk about residential. We certainly, that is not in that buffer that we had extracted from the adult use cannabis dispensary definitions and buffering. But I will say, you may recall, for adult use cannabis, the actual zoning districts within which it is allowed is actually buffered because it was between the two right-of-ways. And you might not recall that, but that's why, yeah, okay, so because of that geographic limitation within the zoning district that it's allowed, the buffering to residential was inconsequential because that did achieve that.
Right.
So that's why that's there, so,
Well,
yeah.
and the other question, I guess I go back to my cigar store analogy, right? If these products weren't being sold, if the the products that some people find offensive weren't being sold in the community, would somebody care if there was a cigar store, 100 feet away from their house, right? As long as they're not lighting up in the parking lot.
Right.
I don't know, I don't know the answer to that. I would think that they wouldn't have a problem with that. I think this whole issue is generated by the products that are being sold.
And like
Quinlan?
Commissioner Mantis pointed out, even the paraphernalia
Yes,
being
and the
sold.
paraphernalia.
Which,
Well, that's a product in my mind.
okay, all right, I thought you were talking about the other.
I am, but I think it's
Deltas
also
and all that.
Nobody
paraphernalia.
wants to see a ball in the window.
Right, nobody wants to see a ball in the window, except my kid.
Well,
Yeah,
Not going there.
it's legal.
I just wanted to concur with what you're kind of mulling over, part of this conversation is like a value statement.
Yeah.
And it's what are Highland Park values? And I think part of that is more of a city council decision to reflect values. I will say that there is one planning document that we have, on the main page for the comprehensive plan is, and I forget the words exactly, I was stumbling for this last time in May, but it's basically, it's the value statement
Right.
of the master plan. And if you look at that piece, what we're proposing, I think reflects that. I think going back to what we, as is restricting it to the two zoning components, I think checks a lot of those buffers because it's not mixed use, if I'm not mistaken. So how much buffer is needed? I don't think a lot because it's already, it's a non-mixed use. If it was in the Ravinia mixed use where you got retail on the storefront and then condos above, that's another issue, but,
Okay.
this could be an easy win if we didn't complicate it.
Jackson.
To concur with Commissioner Quinlan, like in B3 and I districts, I feel like there's no buffer needed as Commissioner Quinlan mentioned, or if needed, just one completely the same as a cannabis dispensary between the right of way for 41, the right of way for the railroad. If we're going into expanding these districts, expanding it to other districts and conditional uses, there should probably be some sort of a buffer there. So just something to consider that what we have that we're definitely going to allow in these places, we're okay with that. But if we're going to continue expanding that, perhaps putting on a buffer in these specific zonings might be an idea, if we're allowed to do that, of course.
There's your next partner, by the way. He's gonna be a real estate attorney.
I'm listening.
All right, anything else that, for the staff? You have what you think you have what you need? Or are you
So the
confused?
buffer, I heard a lot of different things.
Okay, so
Do we
let's-
want a buffer or not? And, or is the buffer that's already in other excellence code taken?
Well, I sense, based on what I heard just now, is that the concept of a buffer of using the two right-of-ways, right, on the I district makes some sense because it does then respond to concern, the concern expressed by Mr. Laxalt and the concern I have about the two specific pieces of property that are outside of that,
Yep.
outside of that area and are surrounded by residential. So, if we had that kind of buffer and said it will, in the I district, east of the railroad tracks,
We'll have
you
it
know,
defined for you. I
so, I think that responds to that buffer idea. And
I
it
like
keeps
that
it out of that, it keeps it out of there. I'm not so worried about 41 because,
And then we have to talk about B3, though. That takes care of I, but then B3, we'd have to look at the same thing.
same
We
thing.
can come back
Right.
with you.
I
with
think
you on that.
that's the idea.
Okay, we get that.
Okay? Everything else is clear as mud, right?
Yep.
All right,
Yes.
what?
That's correct.
Yeah,
That's what we're.
basically. All right. With that, I need a motion to continue this matter till the June, getting ahead of myself, June 20th meeting.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Heck.
Second.
Second by Vice Chair Moore. All in favor?
Aye.
Signify by aye. Motion carries. This matter will be continued to the June 20th meeting, 7 o'clock here in the chambers. There will be no additional notice
Except to the 15 license.
except to the 15 license holders
And everybody who.
and everybody who has signed up to follow
And the
this.
primary use.
So if you haven't signed up to be notified, please, Mr. Burhop has a sheet that you can give him your information. All right, next item is administrative design review update.
Don't have any, Mr.
No, okay. As we said, the next regular meeting is June 20th at 7 o'clock. Do you want to give us a quick preview, Mr. Burhop?
That will be the item that was just discussed, and
Yeah.
then what is referred to as I think it's called the bicycle amendment, that has to do with
Bike
connectivity and
Exciting bike parking, yes,
bike parking.
yes. All right, case briefing?
I do not, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
Business from the public, anybody have business from the public? They've all left. Before we adjourn, I want to let the commissioners, yeah, do you want to, anything you want to say? No, he's just here for fun and games. Before we adjourn, I would like to note that unfortunately, Commissioner Quinlan will be leaving the commission. If you want to say a few words and tell us why and.
Sure, yeah. So prior to accepting the nomination to become a commissioner, I had a legal counsel for where I work review for any possible ethic conflicts of interest. And I was allowed to, through my previous position, was allowed to participate, but recently I was promoted. And we reviewed what the stipulations were for my participation, and some of those items got triggered. And upon further counsel, realized that I needed to resign. So thank you, everyone, very much. I've learned a lot, and as a planner, I mean, I've really a lot of growth. Has happened learning land use law on this level because I've done grassroots, federal, but not on the municipal side. So I'm very grateful, and I will say I've championed, I think, our planners that we have at Highland Park now, knowing, I mean, if you're a certified planner in the state of Illinois, and you go to a planning conference, you're either, you have a former Highland Park planner who is there to help with your accreditation, and you know, another former Highland Park planner is there to help planning commissioners, you know, education, their sessions as well. So, I mean, there's a lot of leadership in this room, so I'm grateful to be part of it.
And Mike, let me say, I think I speak for hopefully everybody on the commission. Your background as a planner has been invaluable to us. You know, we don't say that about everybody. I think the last person we said that about was Ben Cutscheid, who is a landscape architect who we miss every meeting because none of us understand landscaping. You know, your voice will be sorely missed, and I appreciated having you on the commission. And we want you to come back so we can formally recognize you at some point if we can get everybody in the room at one time. But I do want to say that I appreciate the kind words. I think the staff does an excellent job for us as well. You know, and it's been a real pleasure. And guess what? Now you don't have to worry about what time you get home because getting up at 5 a.m. won't be as big of or being on base at 5 a.m, I should say, won't be as big of an issue because you won't have late meetings, and not every meeting is 4 minutes long. All right, with that, I will take a motion to.
One thing I just want to make clear, you know, Commissioner
Fontaine.
Quinlan explained his departure from the commission, and we do thank him for his service. This has nothing to do with the conflict of interest with regard to his service here. It has to do with his employer preferences.
Right.
I just want to make clear about that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no, thank you. You know, the federal government's a pain in the butt.
I'm not arguing him. I just want to be clear that's what it was. It was not anything else.
Write your congressman. All right, with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Heck, second by Vice Chair Moore. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Thank you for your service, Mike.
Thank you.